Wherever you are in the world, hello and welcome to Theos Cybernova podcasts. Before we begin, I've got a quick favor to ask from you. There's one simple way that you could support our show, and that's by hitting the follow or subscribe buttons on the app that you're listening to the show on right now. It makes a huge difference in helping to get the show out there to as many people as possible. So please give us a hand and click that button now. Thank you very much.
The Theos Cybernova podcast, hosted by Paul Jackson.
Welcome to another episode of Theos Cybernova podcast. I'm Paul Jackson, and each week I'm digging into the latest trends, challenges, and innovations shaping the cybersecurity landscape, as well as talking to a fantastic mix of leading industry experts, thought leaders, technologists, and legal eagles, all with a particular focus on the Asia-Pacific region. So, whether you're a professional in the field or simply curious about staying safe in the digital age, we hope Theos Cybernova will offer up valuable knowledge and actionable insights for everyone. So today, I'm delighted, and in fact I'm honoured, to welcome David G, who's with us for the first time. And David is based down under in Sydney, in Australia. But obviously with very strong connections to the part of the world where I'm based in. And David is an absolute cyber legend. Everybody knows him in our region. Every time I'm out with friends in the cyber industry in Hong Kong or wherever, Singapore, wherever it may be, your name inevitably crops up. So thank you so much for taking up the time to join us on the show today, David.
Thanks, Paul. I'm not sure what to say, but thank you.
No, you truly are a legend. And I know, we'll talk about your book in a moment, but it's so highly regarded, and I know you're bringing out another one soon where you're inviting a lot of those other cyber legends from around the region to contribute, and I know that's going to be a fantastic addition to your portfolio of work. All right, so David, I'm not going to read out your bio because who better to introduce yourself than you personally? And, I know it could take up the whole show talking about yourself here, but try and condense it into a.
Oh, gosh. Thank you. It's sort of interesting talking about yourself, but if you summarize it, 20, 25 years, CIO, CISO, pivoted into risk management, my last role prior to retirement. I retired on 4th of July last year, Independence Day. But my last role with Macquarie Group was running tech, cyber, and data risk, and kind of using all that scar tissue I'd accumulated for all those years of management to kind of know where the bad things are and how do I help address that. And also, I guess when you're being a CIO or CISO, you've been haunted by really bad risk people who don't have a clue. So how do I actually not do that? How do I really focus on what really matters and work to protect the organization or the bank versus, protecting my backside? So I've had a lot of fun doing that. And so I'm still doing that now as an advisor for Bain and, doing work with Jay's Careers, doing cyber recruitment and a whole bunch of other stuff. So I've got 8 email addresses, I think. So, yeah.
That's more than enough for now, but we're going to really dig into some of these things. And look, you're the author of the Aspiring CIO and CISO book, which we'll talk about in just a second. But before that, I'm a little bit curious about your personal history because obviously your origins are from more my part of the world, up not far from Hong Kong, right? So how did you end up in Australia?
Look, I think my great-grandfather somehow wandered into Australia. He was, would you believe, he's a tailor by training, and he had that was his training. And then the Chinese surname is Zhu, as in Zhurongji, the Zhu. But they write something down which is G, so I became G. And so my grandfather Fred G was up in the Northern Territory in Western Australia, running businesses, with his towns where there's no Chinese people and Aboriginal people, I think. So it's, I guess, a hard life, because you're in the outback. So I was kind of privileged to grow up in Darwin, which was a very multicultural society where there's an Aboriginal, then an Asian, then an Italian, then a white person. It was very much that way. And so a lot of what I am, I think, is formed from, that sort of living in a very safe place. We didn't lock the door at night. You kind of felt, secure. No one stole from each other. People, knew each other, and I never encountered racism until I left and went to Sydney. So I grew up in this little cocoon in a way, yeah.
Wow. But you say it's safe, but all I ever hear about Darwin is crocodile, snakes, and things that want to kill you, right?
Yeah, no, that don't worry about that. That's an Australian thing. So so many times, as a kid, we'd been, my parents would be playing mahjong in a stream of water. I'm holding, 2 inches, so the old imperial scale. Be sitting on a table playing mahjong, and the kids will be out in the billabong, swimming. Where the following week there'd be a crocodile that took somebody, and the water's dark and murky and cold, and so I don't know how we survived, but we somehow survived all those nasty crocodiles and sharks and stingrays and everything else. Yeah, no, it's all fun.
That's a great story, yeah. Should we switch to Cantonese then to do the rest of the
show? Yeah, my Cantonese is okay, but not great. Mandarin sort of a little better, living in Shanghai, and then also speak a little bit of Japanese as well, but all badly, unfortunately.
Yeah, Mo Hong Gong Joho, right? All right, okay. Let's move on to your book, The Aspiring CIO and CISO. What a fantastic book. It's got so much great feedback. Look at all those 5-star reviews you're getting. I'm sure they're not your friends or anything like that, but no, these are great reviews. So tell us a little bit about the book and what prompted you to write it. Because, you didn't decide to disappear and sit on a beach after retirement. You're giving back to the community and sharing your experience, which I absolutely love. And so tell us a bit more about the book.
It looks a humbling experience to write a book because, and I've, always been a writer in the sense of writing for magazines. So I now write for Foundry and the CIO CISO magazine, and they have a 1.2 million readership each month. So it's a huge. But 8-9 years ago, I was really also writing for the Australian version, and they were syndicating my articles to other parts of the world. But I've always loved writing. So, but for me, the motivation is not money, because you don't get much money from a book. You get a coffee every time you sell a book. I've always enjoyed helping others. And I put it down to this, when I was a kid growing up in Darwin, and I was kind of a fat, lazy kid, right? Spoiled and chubby. And I went to boarding school in Sydney, and then I got sort of more sporty. But at some point in my life, the coach said to me, "Hey, David, we're going to put you into the first team. We're going to make you and I was in the first team for 2 years. We're going to make you the captain. But actually, we're going to ask you one thing. Can you stop shooting? Because you're the best shooter, but I want you to actually pass the ball." And I was like, wait. Why should I pass the ball? I'm the best shooter. And so at the age of 16, 17, I started to learn about how do I make others better. And it was really uncomfortable because I just liked shooting the ball, right? I was good at that. And, I felt the infamy of being the best shooter of the team, I'm the star player of the team. And suddenly, no, your job is to make others better. Pass the ball and be the point guard. And so I've kind of carried that advice with me almost through my life, is how do I make others better? Because if I do that, I can actually help myself, right? Versus being selfish and trying to just do what's about me. How do I be a team player and make others better? And so the book was part of me trying to say, how do I help others grow? Because I've enjoyed that in my career. And I think, Paul, I had the different experience in my career, but one of the things I got into management really early in my life. I just, was managing a team of 3 or 4 when I was 25, 26. At some point, the CIO, who's probably called something different back then, MIS director, just fired the number 2 in charge and said, "David, we're going to promote you. You're 27. We're going to promote you to run this team of 40 people." And I was, oh gosh, okay, how do I do this? Oh, I don't. These guys know more than I do. They're smarter than I. They've got PhDs and master's degrees, and they're it's much smarter in developing code than I am, and supporting these mid-range computers. And so I had to learn and grow up really fast to become a leader and try to find people. How do I get people to follow me, given that they know more than I do? Mm-hmm. And how do I then try to inspire them, inspire myself? So I've always found that a big challenge. And even to this date, I try to inspire myself to what's going to be the things I want to do to make a difference. Yeah.
That's fantastic. And do you know what? We had an episode earlier with a guy called Dickie Wong. And Dickie said exactly the same, or almost the same thing as you said, which was sport played a huge role in developing, how he managed teams. He spoke about rugby. He's a great rugby player, right? How it taught him, about teamwork, how it taught him to, to be a leader on the field. And he took a lot of that back into his working life. And
Paul, this is where I tell people actually, you can practice leadership through that. And for me, it's the same story as Dickie. I know Dickie, by the way. I was in the Dragon Boat team for Australia. And we had big ambitions to be in the Australian team. We tried to create an Australian Chinese team, and to beat the big white boys who were triathletes and Ironmen and stuff. So it was a real challenge because they're professional athletes who train 7 days a week, and we're professional accountants and management and whatever, right? And so, but for me, I learned my management like Dickie by running and creating a Dragon Boat team club with 1, 2, 4 teams, and then organizing. Gosh, we did trips to Malaysia, Singapore, Hong Kong, Macau. You name it. We'd have to get sponsors and then raise money, have charity balls, run discos. Do all these events, and then suddenly you're in charge and you're young and you've got all these passports and all this cash and you're organizing the breakfasts and the dinners and telling the people older than you to go to bed tonight, don't go out, don't play out. And so, I learned, like Dickie says, you learn a lot about yourself and around how to get people to achieve something through other mechanisms. And then you take it back to work and you say, actually, this is easy.
That's right.
Because these people are being paid. This other stuff's pro bono.
100%. And I've got a great Dragon Boat story, by the way. I'll save it for another time. But involved my time when I was in charge of Tayo Police Station on Lantau Island. It's actually a really embarrassing story, but it is quite amusing. But I'll save that for another time. But let's talk more about some of the key components of your book, because I was out to dinner with a group who call themselves Legends of Cyber in Hong Kong, which is quite amusing. But they're a lot of them, of course. They're all senior executives in these positions, and we had a dinner, and they were talking about yourself actually, and because I've mentioned that you'd be on the show, a bit of a teaser, ahead of this episode, and they said one of the things they loved about you is you were a fantastic mentor, right? And that resonates with me because I think, we're both obviously of an age, and it's important to be that mentor and help young professionals to develop in their career. What's the secret? Because you touch on this in your book. So people don't have to read your book. What's the, no, I'm joking. What's the secret to good mentorship?
It is interesting. I landed my first CIO job in Australia with Eli Lilly, and then they promised it, and I'll talk about this in my some keynotes I do. I was sort of torn up in my world. I had these job offers to be a partner with EY Consulting or be a partner with AD Carney or go off in the CIO career. And I said, actually, if I do a partner role, I get this nice office, I make all this money. People think it's prestigious, but actually it's kind of like short term, not very strategic, not really doing things for the world. Why don't I do something important? So I made that choice, Paul. So when I get to my second assignment, as a CIO in Shanghai, and this is 1999. So China's like an idea, right? And there's a 10-year strategy we're putting together with BCG Consulting. And my first meeting is with HR, and HR said, David, you're coming here, we're trying to build, what's going to be number one, number two, for this company globally. Can you leave deep footprints? And I thought, okay, that's interesting. I've been building data centers, I've been building applications, doing all this other stuff. Deep footprints. What does she mean by that? She said, well, I mean, with your people, how do you do that? And I said, well, I'll be doing that in Australia. I've created now a regional team. And then I realized that, it was really the calling I had as a leader is how do you then hire people, make them the best versions of themselves. And I take a snippet out of my learnings, which I put in the book. If you take a very simple equation, Paul, and you said, okay, you walk into a team anywhere in the world, right? A bank, an insurance company, you can't fire everybody you have. You got to usually work with them, right? And you might make some changes over time. So as a leader, how do you make this team supercharged? And so they can't always be superstars, unfortunately. That's just the way it is, right? So I walk in, I've got Paul. Paul's really good. Paul, on a good day, can be a 7 out of 10. On a better day can be 8 out of 10, right? But when he's got a bad day, he's 6. How do I encourage Paul to understand Paul's thinking, Paul's mindset, to say, how do I help Paul be an 8? What makes him an 8? Is he need some encouragement? Is it actually that he's a bit afraid to take chances? How do I stretch him? And David, he's rubbish and he's 3 out of 10. How do I get him to be a 6? Maybe 6 is at a stretch, but if I encourage him, figure out how he thinks, I can get David and Paul to be the best version of themselves. And how do I get them to be a good team so they're actually working together? So it's not a negative, conflict situation where it's a minus. It's a multiplication which means as a leader, I'm getting fantastic results. Now, to me, that's just a simple equation. A number versus another person, coaching them to be the best version of themselves, giving them, and actually I've said this to my team members. I said, today, Bob, I know you can be a 7. Today you're a 5. And the reason why you're a 5 is you're not doing this, or you're not engaging stakeholders. You're not actually stretching yourself, and you stay in the comfort zone. And when you're a comfort zone, mate, you're a 5. And I want you to be a 7. When you be a 7, I can reward you. I can do more things for you. And you can get more opportunities as a leader because you're being comfortable being uncomfortable.
That's fantastic. It's great insights, because as soon as we finish this, I'm in the office right now, and I'm going to walk out the door and go to one of my team. You're a 5. And no, in all seriousness, this is actually a great way of looking at it. Really great.
Being straight's important, but also then, how do you be specific, right? Telling Paul that his communication skills are poor doesn't help. What does that mean? Is it the listening?
Yes.
Is it when he's in a group of 10 people that he goes quiet? What is it specifically?
Yes.
If you can figure that out. So I always tell people this story and say, when I was 25, 26, 27, getting promoted to these big jobs, and I had to run a team meeting, I was scared. I mean, I didn't want to speak in public like that. I liked one-on-ones, 10 people, oh gosh. And so I said, okay, how do I volunteer to do this? How do I volunteer to run workshops? 50 people, 100 people, 200 people, 500 people, 1,000 people, different countries, 5,000. How do I do that, right? And so I focused on that as being a weak point to make it into a strength. And so you have to understand, where are you and what scares you? And then therefore, how do I then try to practice that, if that makes sense?
Yeah, look, I think we've both been leaders for a long, long time, and I'm with you on this, because it's no point just picking holes or pointing out failings without showing a path to the improvement, what steps they can take to get from that 5 to 6 to 7 to 8 and up.
And the structure I put in my book, mate, is the skills, knowledge, experience, behavior, right?
Yes.
4 quadrants. You pick one of those and say, okay, for me to be 2 jobs ahead of where I am, okay?
Yep.
I need to be thinking about this. Look at a good example. So I was HSBC CISO in Hong Kong for 3 years. I can go and get another CISO job. I go back to be a CIO. Why don't I go and do risk management? Why would I do that? Because I wanted to be better at asking questions. I've been really good at doing things. If I want to be a board member, and board members get a chance to ask 1 to 2 questions each quarter, maybe, right? How do I make sure that I ask the right question, not the question number 20 or 19, by really thinking through what's going to make a difference from the risk at an enterprise level versus me being the person who gets all the stuff done, the transformation shit, right? I'm good at that. But if I want to be progressing in that field, I need to be thinking about myself 2 jobs ahead, which is boards, and then making sure that I spend the next 3 years just asking really hard questions.
Yes, you're absolutely right. And again, you've resonated with me, because a lot of people ask me, why have you moved away from being client-focused, client-facing in my previous roles as leaders of delivery teams in Asia, to being a CEO of a company? And it's really about, extending myself and also empowering the people that are in this company and helping them to be better, to go on to reach greater heights, and to show that this company, an Asia-based company, can compete with the best of the international companies and be, something to be proud of in Asia. So, yeah, it's all about not only pushing yourself, but also putting yourself in a position where you can help others to be better than they are. And I think, we're both on the same page.
Yeah, and mate, there's pride in going back and see, people you've developed, and I sometimes speak to people who are now CEOs, COOs, CIOs, and then I'll contact them, or someone contacted me after reading my book, and they say, David, I read the book and I actually can hear your voice as I read the book. And then I actually said, you told me I should be doing this all those years ago, 12 years ago, and that's still in my head. I'm still thinking about, am I doing this? Am I delegating enough? Because if I don't delegate, I'm not growing my team. And
right.
Their capability, but I'm holding it on, being a really good leader and getting stuff done. That's great. But actually, I need to also build these guys below me, guys and girls below me. And that was a woman, by the way, who said that to me and said, David, that advice I'll carry for 12 years now. And now she's a COO for a large organization in Australia. So that makes me really proud.
So if at this point in the podcast, if any of our listeners aren't already on Amazon.com looking for the Aspiring CIO and CISO, well, you really should be. But let's pick another aspect of this book, which is how you get in that front door in the first place. Because I know in the book you talk about preparing for interviews, interview questions. What's your top tips for somebody who is an aspiring CIO or CISO? Let's focus on CISO as we're a cybersecurity podcast. What is the most important tips you can give to somebody who wants to open that door?
Yeah, no, look, I go back to the experience of behavior, right? It's in the day, if you got these certifications, these accreditations, these degrees, it's kind of so what? I mean, that's all foundational. You got to have it, right? You got to have these things and have some knowledge. But what you're looking for is you're looking for the experience. People have got experience doing hard things, solving problems. Okay, you've been hacked. Actually, great. You actually understand how to recover from being hacked. I see it as being a positive, right? It's Paul. It's no different to interviewing a person in China one time, and then I was saying, "Oh, you got 5 years gap in your CV." Oh, I hacked the US government, so I got put in jail by the Chinese. Love it because he's honest. Love it because he can do it. Okay, right. And so HR like, oh gosh, you can't hide this. But, oh no, this is tick for me. And so for me, trying to figure out, what are the pointy things around experience that make a huge difference. Yes, show leadership, show you can do things. Now, the behavior side, right? The B side. Now, so can you work with difficult stakeholders? Can you say no to them? Can you say no to the board? Can you say no to the chief risk officer when they're pushing you to do things you shouldn't be doing? Now, let's take a great example. And I've had this, not myself, but others I've come in, that I've seen done. And you're the new CISO, okay? They ask me for advice, and I say, well, actually, you don't have enough budget, you don't have enough resources, and this is your first board meeting. What are you going to say? Are you going to say what the boss tells you to say, the CIO, or are you going to say, I need to look into this, I'm concerned? Don't throw them under the bus but actually say, I'm not sure we're there yet. I'm not, how do you then show the right leadership behaviors so you're not becoming a victim? So when they get hacked and say, well, you asked and you didn't ask for anything, David, right? It's a bad lose-win situation, right? How do you make sure you stand up for yourself and what you need? And that's behavior. That's having the backbone. That's having kahunas, right? They say, right? So how do you show me that? Show me that. And if you got that, I will always back those people every time.
Fantastic advice. And I'm 100% with you on that. And I also agree with you on the qualifications. Yes, they're a way to get, through the HR paper mill. But at the end of the day, it's that passion. It's the aptitude, the willingness to push the boundaries and to show yourself as a leader that are really, truly important. So 100% agree.
No, so I'm not advertising the Jay's career stuff because that's in Australia, but as a recruiter now, advising a recruitment firm around tech, cyber, and data, I do people screening every day.
Okay. Yep.
And I'll call you, Paul. I've seen your CV or LinkedIn account, and I'll call you, and I can figure out in 5 minutes whether you've got the right thing. Provided you're not in a work environment where you can't speak well, I can figure out, does he have the right stuff? Is he curious? Is she want to solve problems, or what's the word I used the other day? I said, okay, are you a vitamin or are you a painkiller? I want to hire the painkillers, right? Painkillers help me.
Vitamin or a painkiller? I love that.
Vitamins make you feel better, yeah?
Right.
They don't fix anything, but painkillers really fix the problem, and they make a big difference.
We just heard a soundbite for this episode, haven't we? Are you a vitamin or a painkiller? I love that. But you're right, because when you talk about 5 minutes in, when I was at JP Morgan building out the team there, based out of New York, running the big team there, I was doing hundreds of interviews, literally. And you're right, probably within 5 minutes, I'd made my mind up, and the rest of it was all just filler.
Which is unfortunate, because you then spend the next 55 minutes thinking, okay, how do I justify my decision?
Yes. Yeah. And you're 100% right on that. And look, I always showed people respect, of course, by going through the entire interview, even if I decided within those 5 minutes. But still, those first 5 minutes are crucial. And if you can't get your talent across, your potential across, then
I've seen people come to interviews and there's no eye contact. I was once interviewing an architect and say, okay, so here's the pen. Can we just go and draw? Can we just go and I want to understand you think. And the person wouldn't draw. He wouldn't give me. I said, I don't care if it's a data model or a system diagram or a rich picture. I just want to understand how you think through a problem. And because he wouldn't and he's an architect. We didn't grab the pen. I was like, wait, you're an architect. You should love drawing.
No, absolutely. And I actually really love the fact that you're working in the recruitment space now, because it's been a big bugbear of mine down the years how poor cyber recruiting is. And you'll probably be aware, a couple of episodes we had Craig Johnson on, who's an absolute leader in the cyber recruitment space, somebody who takes it seriously, lives and breathes this sort of stuff. And he has brought in people like yourself, right, who are experts to be advisors. And I think that's a great model where, you've got people who've been there, done that, who can actually help with interview processes or assessments. Because, sometimes it's the blind leading the blind when in recruiting, you get, say, a CEO of a company who's trying to hire a CISO, but obviously their skill sets are in the business, not in cyber. And how are they supposed to determine which CISO is better than the other, right?
Yeah, no, look, I've seen it so many times when we're doing these recruiting roles for CISOs and the team below. It's just you're trying to do a Tyndall match, right? Okay, so how do they match up that the cultures fit, that they're looking for the right, interface to board, interface with the team, interface with peers, level of, competency, because the level of depth requirements may vary depending on the size of the organization. Whether it's a large organization, they maybe can get by without having everything on their CV.
Yes, absolutely. Okay, I want to switch gears a little bit, because you mentioned earlier about boards, your aspirations to be on big boards, etc. You'll remember a year and a half ago, whatever it was, the SEC were, put out the discussion around what the roles and responsibilities should be for boards of listed companies. And there was a lot of debate as to whether there should be a cyber expert on the board. I'd like to hear your views on that.
No, there shouldn't be. Now, It's interesting. I got a biased position here, of course, being sort of a digital CIO, a risk professional, and a CISO, right? I'm kind of covering, triple threat. I'm doing all kinds of different things. When you understand what boards do, then if you're a member of a board, you need to be more than the cyber expert. You need to actually be a board member first that helps the organization grow, help them with their strategy, helping them with their people succession planning, and the whole those dimensions around, the environmental, all those issues you got to weigh in on. Okay, you can't just be the person who can solely talk about that. Now, that being said, because I know too much about cyber, I'm kind of cautious which ones I would join anyway, because suddenly if you're the cyber person, you're hacked, then it's my fault, right? And you're not even operational. So it is interesting. The same token, I did, prior to retiring, I did meet a lot of technology board members around town and figured out that a lot of them are ex-CIOs or project people, and they don't necessarily understand cyber. They might understand some of it. So it is an interesting one. People will get there, but you do need to be rounded. You need to have all the other dimensions, in that sort of board portfolio prioritization with skills matrix they do. You got to tick a few boxes. You can't just tick one box and think that's enough, because I think they're going to be saying, I want this person to help drive digital change. I want this person to help, be on the risk committee and look at risks broadly. And cyber risk is one of those risks. Very important, of course. I don't understate that, but actually, you can't just be one dimensional and expect to get the job because SEC says so, and that's fair.
100%. So, one of my key roles, I spoke earlier that as a CEO, I've stepped backwards, obviously, with client delivery, but one of the areas I do still engage with clients is delivering board briefings because of my background. And risk is, of course, the most important function, really, I think, managing risk. And as a former police officer, etc., I've seen all sides of risk, obviously. And so I'm able to sort of put this in a perspective that is meaningful for boards. So I do a lot of board briefings, and I know you do as well. But I'd love to pick your brains a little bit, because nobody's perfect at doing this. What kind of things do you focus on when you're talking to boards? What do you think resonates most with them?
It's interesting. When I was with HSBC, that was one of the things I did a lot of, because that was part of my job globally. And so I think I would do a few hundred board briefings in a year and prepare the board packs that others would use as well. Now, interestingly to me, we, given that the audience, the board members actually don't necessarily understand this in depth, how do you provide to them without telling them to suck eggs? How do you provide to them, respectfully? Here's the position. Here's where we are. Here's our risk position. Here's our path to goodness. I don't want to say green, our path to goodness, and let them understand that this is where we are, and, just give them the facts. I think I've seen so many, CIOs and CISOs provide a very tainted version that looks better than it is, and that doesn't do you very much good. The whole advice, and I got this from Robert Veras, who's one of the CISOs here, which is really good advice, which is boards have to challenge the greens, and that's not typically what they do. They they challenge the reds. But how do you challenge the greens and say, is that really green? And then support the reds.
Got it.
Because the reds mean, and I said this to CISO recently, I'm helping Bank in Australia, and how do you get help? How do I help you get the right help for your risk tech cyber appetite? And which means you've got to have this amount of support for the next X number of years, and then they actually understand that every time you do, a end of life, end of service support thing, that's bad, right? That's actually a negative to your risk appetite. And so don't assume that metrics are going to be good. They're going to be bad. That's okay. As long as we know those are there and we're going to track them and try to do more to contain that, that's good. But that's a mindset shift, cultural shift. And so how do you get the board to help you with that? And so a lot of dimensions there about board reporting and having boards involved in exercises, all that sort of stuff works.
Agreed. And if you'll do me the honor of appearing on another episode in the future, I think that's a topic that we can drill into, really, governance and board responsibilities, because I think such a hot topic right now. I get asked this all the time, but I'm conscious of time here. And I do want to touch on one more point before I hit the music question, which always appears at the end of these shows. It's that, look, you're Australian. You've got a lot of history of working in China, Hong Kong, and your Chinese heritage, of course. I'm predominantly in Hong Kong, etc. Geopolitics, ouch. Without diving into that too deeply and getting in trouble, you, though, have a new role, don't you? Because you're the ambassador for the CIISAC. Could you explain a little bit about what that means and what those responsibilities are?
Look, I took that role on a few weeks ago, and it's interesting. I spent 3-4 years or longer as the chairman for FSISAC's Asia Pac of their strategy committee, and I to me, it was all around how do we work to protect ourselves and others. And I think I remember at the July FSISAC meetings in Singapore, the CISO congresses, and I said, look, here's where we are, guys. If I think about this, and I wrote a story about this from CSO magazine, which is called the Musox strategy, right? And I said, here's the story. We're all working together, and we're kind of saying, the wolves are coming, the wolves are coming, the wolves are coming. And then we as good Musox will put our horns up, go into a semicircle, put the babies in the middle, and protect the babies. That's what the Musox do, and it's good because that means, so if I took this a step further, right, and put this analogy of nature into our world, we're doing this exercise. We're saying the wolf's coming. We don't put our horns up. We don't put our babies in the middle. Our babies could be our vendors. They could all subsidiaries. We kind of say, hey, the wolf's coming, and then they're on their own. Not good enough. Can we go this step further? Can we think about evolving our defenses more in that fashion that we think about others rather than just ourselves? Now, I said, and jokingly, which is in the article, when the muskox sees the bear, they run. They just run because they realize that it's every man for himself. So there's always self-preservation in cybersecurity because that pays your bills, right? So I get that. But what can we do more broadly? So to me, the CIISAC stuff is exactly that. Financial services is the most advanced because we've spent the most money. We've been the most attacked in the past, not longer anymore. Others have attacked more, but we attacked a lot. So we got good at this, I think, or better at this. So for me, the whole argument's interesting because, we said that if you're actually protecting yourself and don't think about other sectors, you kind of be foolhardy because your resilience is relying on others. So that water, that electricity, that data center, that network, all these have critical infrastructure. If they don't work, you don't work, right? So it's great you're being protected here and you're providing intel to each other, but what about sharing that with your buddies? And so for me, the story was, and we wrote to all the top CIOs and CISOs as a letter a few weeks ago to invite them to come and join us, to work together, to share information, have a meeting, and join this cause. No stick. This is not regulatory, right? This is a carrot, which is how do you help yourself? And the words I wrote in the letter, and I had the chairman of CIISAC also co-sign this, which was, my dad fought in the army in New Guinea against the Japanese in the jungles, right? Trying not to be shot by his own soldiers because he looked the wrong color, okay? And similarly, Stephen, our chairman, he spent 35 years in the Australian Army, then ended up running cybersecurity for the government. Dedicated protecting Australia. This is the same thing. It's becoming that way in this world that we have these polars happening. So we need to be thinking about this. That's not just the company. It's all about, I live in this country. I got to protect the country. I got to protect my partners as well, other countries that we're partners. How do we do that and look more broadly? That's the cause, and I love that, because that gets my juices flowing about. It's no longer just protecting this organization, but also protecting everybody that sits within that organization ecosystem.
Well, with the proliferation, if I could say the word, of new critical infrastructure, and by the way, I should have said CI stands for critical infrastructure, of course, bills coming out across our region, this is indeed a hot topic. And do you know what? You've just signed yourself up for yet another episode where we dig into critical infrastructure protection. So, look, this has been fantastic. And look, I recognize we're running out of time, unfortunately. So my last question to you, music. You know, I always tell the audience, this is my way of decompressing, putting a vinyl record on, and just listening to some good music. What about you? Do you enjoy listening to music? What do you listen to at the moment?
I do. I mean, look, I was in Vegas in October, and in Vegas recently for another event, kickoff event recently. And I went to 2 concerts. I went to see Lionel Richie in Vegas 3 weeks ago. Which was fun because Lionel's just entertaining. He's 70 years old, and the girls are still passing him notes on stage. And he kind of goes, "Oh, I'm old for this." So that's really, really fun. And then in October, we had the privilege of going to see the Eagles at the Sphere.
Fantastic.
And the Sphere is 20,000 seats with 116,400 speakers.
I would love to go. I saw the YouTube videos, etc. there, and
it's just nuts. And we had our friend who knows the sound engineer and got us staff price tickets, which were street value $2,500 for $400. Wow. So we had the best seats in the house, and the sound just blew my mind. Just the quality was just nuts. The visuals was nuts. I think I was at a Coldplay concert a month later and going like, the sound's rubbish. The band's fantastic. The light show's great, but from a visual standpoint, literally you're crying. You are literally crying because it's so beautiful. And they have a 200-piece orchestra that they did live with U2. And my friend's friend said, no. What they decided to do was they recorded that and mix it in live because they can sell 200 more seats.
Wow, that's crazy.
So the technology is off the charts. Yeah,
crazy. Right, everybody. The Aspiring CIO and CISO, a career guide to developing leadership skills, knowledge, experience, and behavior. Get on Amazon right now and buy it. By David J. What does J stand for, by the way?
Jordan. As in Michael Jordan.
David J. Gee. And it's in all good bookshops, but probably best to get it off Amazon. And it's a great read. David, thank you so much for being on the show today. Definitely going to get you back. And thank you so much for giving up your valuable time to be with us today.
Pleasure. Thank you.
So Theos Cybernova was presented by myself, Paul Jackson. The studio engineer and editor was Roy DeMonte. The executive producer was myself and Ian Carlos. And this podcast is a co-production between Theos Cyber and W4 Podcast Studio.
The Theos Cybernova Podcast.